Hello, everyone, and welcome to our podcast, Inside National Security by the National Security Academy. Today, I'm joined by Dexter Ingram. Dexter, it's very nice to talk to you.
Great to be here, Cassian, as always.
So, I am the ambassador and development coordinator for the network, the National Security Academy, which is basically the creator of this podcast, as well as I work in the private sector, more in the business side. But it's I think me and Dexter both create very good synergy because he comes from the public sector. Dexter, tell a bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'm former Navy flyer, counterterrorism strategist. I've spent a lot of time at the State Department, at Homeland Security, at the FBI, and at Interpol. And I'm also the founder of Network.
Exactly. So it's going to be a very good conversation today. But today we have a very important, I think, pressing and interesting issue on topic, which is infrastructure, right? Infrastructure can be very critical, especially to national security. In the context of national security, when we talk about resilience, when we talk about these buzzwords, how important is infrastructure for everything that we do?
Infrastructure allows us to perform our daily activities. I mean, our banking systems, our food, you name it, our electrical grids, all the things that allow us to move, transportation. That includes air transportation, rail transportation. Not being able to move, not being able to access our electrical grid or our banking systems or our food security, super important.
And it's also important to secure them, right, Dexter? Because we have some things like, let's say, especially related to energy, where it's a critical resource for the powering of a whole nation or region. And so I wanted to ask you, so how does one protect them, these critical infrastructures during times of crisis, maybe even day to day at a normal time in history or in the present?
Yeah, so you have big infrastructure like nuclear power plants and our oil supply. Um, those definitely need to be protected. There's a lot of softer targets out there, like just power grids in general. You see a lot of anti-government folks wanting to shoot up some of these power grids, and they've done it in the past. A lot of folks have been arrested for it, but there are vulnerabilities out there. Now, normally that affects somewhat of a smaller subset. It doesn't affect like a region per se, but I think making sure that we're listening to folks who are talking and making threats and ensuring they don't follow through with those threats is really important.
And I mean, I think most people don't realize as well, looking around, how much is infrastructure, right? From the roads which we drive on to now being able to connect through this virtual conference, right? You need Wi-Fi. How do you get that?
Hmm.
You need stable infrastructure for day-to-day works. So it definitely is something that most people might not think of first off, but is so important for the day-to-day. Do you have any examples or maybe choices that you make when things maybe don't go as planned? It can be about infrastructure or something else, where you try to recover from a bad scenario.
I mean, on the human level, like just on the personal level, during COVID, we made sure that we had certain um, things that we needed, whether it's medical bags, whether it's toilet paper, whether it was food, not relying on the banks for everything, making sure you have some level of cash on you. But as far as, professionally, what we try to do is make sure that we're communicating, understanding why things happened. We had this really big power grid go out in the northeast of the United States a few years back, and that was not an act of terrorism. It wasn't some competitor country attacking us. It was just something that happened, and luckily, it happened on basically a Friday afternoon. So when it came to the power grid, when it came to storing food and food going bad, when it came to the banking systems and all the things that it did affect, it was pretty short-lived because it was a Friday afternoon. Now, if that was a Tuesday midday, it might have been a lot more tragic. And that was something, again, that wasn't even actually an act of terrorism or another country. It was just something that happened. So we have to be vigilant. We have to share information. We have to understand the threats. And we have to make sure that we do as much as we can to kind of mitigate any kind of serious effects from these actions that could happen.
Yes. It's always best to be prepared, right?
Mhm.
Those like a saying, which is something like preparation and action creates luck, or something like that. And so preparation is so important in pretty much all aspects of life. And something I wanted to touch up with you, Dexter, as we spoke about in the introduction, as I come more from the private sector and you from the public sector, I often feel like if there is an effective collaboration between the two, it can create so many advancements. Why? Because first off, there might be less taxpayer money used for certain projects by private investors. And sometimes the efficiency from the private sector, from new industries which grow very, very quickly, can be a great resource for the public sector too, and vice versa. So, how would you say, how is it important, and how do you define an effective collaboration between the public sector and private sector about infrastructure, about things related to it?
Yeah, I'm constantly talking to our private sector partners out there. There's so many different groups that are listening and getting information from folks that are making threats and kind of connecting those dots. And they're also trying to redirect some of those folks as well. So there's a number of really innovative groups out there. I'm not just talking about like big groups like Meta, Google, and so on and so forth. I'm talking about, groups out there like Moonshot, which is a smaller group, but they're super effective in what they do when it comes to kind of understanding who's saying what online and kind of either trying to redirect them or look at the numbers and really kind of analyze the threats behind it. If there's no collaboration between government and these key important private sector organizations, um, the threats just become so much greater. I mean, we learned a long time ago that if somebody's out there buying a lot of fertilizer, well, the private sector is now reaching out to the government and letting them know. And that's just not in the United States. We're doing that in the Philippines and other places as well. I'm teaching them how to have these kind of connections because that fertilizer can be used for farming, but it can also be used for explosives. We saw that with the Oklahoma City bombing. Key infrastructure is a big part of that. So whether they're shooting up a power plant and causing folks to lose electricity, whether they're attacking the rails like they did before the Olympics to kind of shut down the flow of people. All these things disrupt society in general, and that's the goal of a lot of these folks out there. There are other companies out there that kind of combat this as much as possible, and it feeds into what the FBI is saying or what other law enforcement agencies are doing around the world. Sharing information is also important. The U.S. has actually shared information on threats to other countries that we've found out about when it comes to infrastructure. Normally they listen to us, sometimes they don't listen to us, and then the attacks happen. And again, you never say I told you so, but we're trying to do as much as we can to communicate, what we're seeing, what we're hearing, and what we think.
And talking about the public and private sector, something I noticed was that, let's say in the world where two companies merge or one acquires another one, you often have the main question, which is it better that I create this company or this thing naturally, so me myself build it up, or should I just acquire it and acquire the human capital and acquire everything the company stands for artificially, and then I have ownership of it. And so with the government, I think it's a similar thing when pose the question, should the government create these systems themselves, proprietary, or should they work together with a private company to fill that gap, right?
Right now, I feel that the gaps are being filled to an extent. I love the fact that government isn't filling all the gaps because, there are certain things the private sector is faster at. There's so many things out there that can, disrupt society or do harm. I mean, you saw Chernobyl, what happened there, and 3 Mile Island when it comes to the nuclear accidents out there. Imagine these things being intentional. Again, we saw what happened with the railways in the recent Olympics in France. Those were intentional. You can see what a traffic jam or a traffic accident on the way to work can do to your commute, how that can just really shut things down. Imagine those things being intentional. So it's important for us to kind of listen to people, understand the threats, find ways to mitigate those threats as fast as possible, and work with folks that are in that realm, whether it's the private sector or NGOs or whoever it may be.
I spoke to once with a colleague of mine who was based in Ghana, and he made a lot of business in Ghana. He worked for the government too, and he told me how some of the most critical infrastructure, such as roads we talked about, they obviously have in some areas, but in some areas they don't, and it can be very bad for many people, especially let's say for logistics company that try to export goods or import goods from one place to another because as there's no clear defined road, it makes it harder for the trucks, for example, to travel through, right? And so
Mhm.
I think it's also important for the US and other nations to look at the more developing economies, right? And see how one can strengthen the infrastructure in those countries because truly there's a true link between good infrastructure and good quality of life. And so it's very important that yeah, the government and private sector both work together to make that happen and to make the best quality of life, even in countries which aren't ours, right?
Yeah, I have a buddy of mine. We were in the Navy together, and he has this drone company that basically can fly indefinitely. It's a tethered drone that has these lights on it, and it's a game changer. You are able to illuminate like a football field size area off of one drone anywhere in the world. So whether it's security in certain African countries, whether it's a sporting event, whether it's recovering from a blackout. These drones can be up there, and again, they illuminate a huge area at nighttime. And that's just another aspect of private sector filling a need that's important. It could be something as simple as a football game, or it could be something as important as recovering from an earthquake, natural disaster, or just power outage in general.
Yes. And Dexter, how important do you think is light? Because I always say that light, people don't, I think, realize it too much. But if you're outside at night and it's very dark outside and you don't have the infrastructure such as lighting, good lighting, I
Mhm.
think definitely crime gets minimized if there is good lighting, if people walk outside and you can see what's happening. I don't know, at least a couple feet in front of you, you know. So I think light definitely is also very important. What do you think of that?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's a security issue, it's a safety issue, it's a communication issue and transportation issue. There's so many different pieces to that. So that's why, I look at what he's done, and just by having a generator and a tethered drone, being able to light a huge area is a game changer anywhere in the world.
Yes.
So that there's a lot of innovation that's happening out there that's really, really positive.
What advice would you give them to build up resilience? They can be in government, in business, in civil society. Uh, yeah, to build up security and to grow resilience in times of so much uncertainty as we have at the moment, right?
Yeah, I'd say don't be paranoid, but I'd also say, don't be so reliant on all the things that so many people take for granted. When it comes to energy, you should have extra sources of energy at your house. We see that. Some people have solar panels,
Yes.
some people have generators. When it comes to food security, that's also really, really important. When it comes to travel in general, I think that you just got to appreciate what you got when you got it and make sure that you just aren't so over reliant on any one aspect of anything where if it goes away, your well-being is just, kaput. So, you know, don't be paranoid, but do kind of think of other ways you can get things done based on different scenarios.
Very good. I mean, we saw the perfect example during COVID as well. I mean, many people wanted, unfortunately, to go to the store, and many of the most basic necessities weren't there. And I think that was a wake-up call to many people. They try to now have a pantry or like a place where they store foods that last a long time or necessities, which are very important to the day-to-day life. So I very much enjoyed the conversation today, Dexter. And yeah, I think it's an important issue that also people can think about in their private time, infrastructure and security. So thank you very much.
Hey, Cassian, it's been my pleasure. Thanks for bearing with me as I'm kind of recovering from this cold. Really appreciate it.